Hello and welcome to this episode of The Rest is Entertainment Questions and Answers edition. I'm Marina Hyde.
And I'm Richard Osman. Hello, Marina.
Hello, Richard. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. We are going to be talking about Bookshelf Gate later on. Maybe we'll do that sort of in the second half of the show.
Yeah.
Let's get some other questions out of the way first, but we are
Enter
going
the
to be...
bookcaseum with me, Richard.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
I'm going to do battle with you.
Well, yeah, last week's episode was entitled, Is Richard a Psychopath? Because I ordered my books by size. And we're going to have an answer to the question, Is Richard a psychopath? I think. And whether somebody else might be a psychopath.
I think we're going to have a different answer entirely. Let us begin with a question from Steve Rich. The BBC's very tight on advertising, says Steve, and you often hear presenters saying things like, other crisps are available when someone mentions Pringles. How then does a show like Top Gear get away with it, with what is essentially advertising various car brands, similarly on Saturday Kitchen when they recommend wine?
It's sort of quite simple, yeah. If you do, you're not allowed to make commercial references. So, you'll often see on shows, people will talk about cooking with yeast extract, or they'll talk about, cooking with an Irish cream liqueur instead of Marmite and Baileys. And that's very, very traditional. You have to take those things out of scripts. If on a comedy show or something like that, someone mentions Twix, you absolutely can get away with it by saying other chocolate bars are available. So as well as being just a sort of traditional joke form, other chocolate bars are available. Actually, it sort of works. I think probably legally it doesn't really have any standing, but by and large the lawyers let it through. With the things like Top Gear and Saturday Kitchen, and also another way that you can get away with mentioning things is what you can't have is undue prominence.
Yeah.
So if you do a show, you just talk about Twix the whole way through, for example, you would be chastised for it. The lawyers would say that you can't do this. If, though, you talk about Twix and you talk about Twirl and you talk about Drifter and you talk about Mars Bar, yeah, that's
Suddenly
okay.
You've got a variety show.
You have a variety, exactly. You have a variety pack, if you will, and there are celebrations in the lawyer's office. So if you mention other things, and so that's how, Top Gear, of course, every week they review cars. Every week they have different cars, and so they are not giving undue prominence to a particular brand.
And it's a review show. It sounds ridiculous.
And it's a review show.
It's so much more than a review show, but it is a review show.
So much more than that. And Saturday Kitchen as well. If Ollie Smith brings on a wine from Waitrose, you would sort of make sure across the series that next week's wine was from an independent retailer, and then the week after it was from Morrison's, and you just make sure that undue prominence is not happening. So when you do have to have products, and Saturday Kitchen, that's sort of a review as well. You're recommending things. You are allowed some leeway, but you have to make sure across the series that no one is being represented more than anybody else. And I do, it drives. Especially in a comedy show, you can't just. They could say, well, could you redo that joke, but say chocolate bar instead of Snickers?
No, it's not funny.
You absolutely can't.
The specificity of it is so important.
Exactly, the specificity of brands. But, God bless the BBC, it is hard for them because they are not allowed to. So if you can help them out by saying other chocolate bars are available, or immediately talking about a Cadbury's cream egg, then you'll try and do that. I have a question for you, Marina, and it is from Isabella Lloyd Webber. Firstly, all of us Lloyd Webbers absolutely adore your podcast. I don't know if she's from the famous Lloyd Webber family. It is a hell of a flex if she's not. If she's just from my mum, Maureen, my dad, Steve Lloyd Webber. We all love the podcast. Let's assume she's from the Lloyd Webber family. We discuss it on our family WhatsApp group weekly. Oh my God, that's going to go off this week, isn't it?
It is going to kick off.
On the Lloyd Webber WhatsApp. Goodness me. What do you think of the news that the Night Times Industries Association has predicted there will be no nightclubs by 2029?
Oh, that is such a good question. And it's so miserable, isn't it?
If they close down the Starlight Express,
yeah.
I'm going to lose my mind.
I'm sure you will. One club is closing every 2 days, are they saying now? I think there's a lot of reasons behind this. And some people would say, oh, people are drinking less, which, I mean, not if you go out in central London anyway. It's a global issue. There's lots of different things. And obviously there's certain individual factors like safety and things have changed like that. Experience, culture, the rise of that, people willing to spend their money on that, but not other things. The biggest one, the pandemic, obviously, that was a disaster. It created lots of people who don't necessarily, made people feel much more sort of homebound.
At the same time as the capital costs of anyone who owned those big buildings and running those big buildings, some decided to call it a day and never got reopened.
And they're changing into apartments because it's trying to address housing and what have you. I mean, when I think it's interesting what type of nightclubs you're talking about, Isabella, and you're probably talking about all types of them because they're all under threat. the ones where the party itself was the focus, and the dancing and all of that, you've got those huge kind of places like, I don't know, Studio 54, all those ones that become...
Cinderella Rockefellers. Roxy's.
Yes, all of those.
Yeah, Embargo.
God. Yeah, God, I'm thinking of experiences in all of these. Okay, not Studio 54, I should say, but I would have 100% ridden in on a white horse like Bianca Jagger. I think we all know.
Yeah, I can say I definitely would have had a blue WKD at Romford Embargoes.
There was one in Eastbourne called Tuxedo Junction, which I love as a name, but they then tried to make it cooler in the 90s, called it TJ's, but I think everyone knew what was going on. Anyway, you got to call, okay, and then the kind of clubs that I used to go to a lot, the ones that grew up out of rave culture. Yeah. And what happened with all of those clubs to some extent was that they were a story business, that it was about the club. And it was about the atmosphere, and people talked about them as substitute churches, as families, and I'm not just the big sort of dancing super clubs, all sorts of things, and that people thought of them like that. But then they became a stars business, and lots of big DJs became huge. Once you're hearing that DJs are flying all the way around the world and going to different places, lots of local people were kind of priced out. I think that the modern problem with clubbing, let me tell you some stuff that killed clubs, right? Bottle service killed clubs. I hate bottle service in clubs. Hate everything.
What's bottle service?
When they bring a bottle to your table, right? And it's dickheads ordering like, I'm going to order some champagne in a club. This was just not a thing. I mean, basically, when you were growing up, going to all those kind of big clubs, like say we go to Cream in Liverpool or like Gatecrasher or any of those ones, Club UK.
I've never seen you so animated.
No,
I feel like you're really
everyone was drinking
your youth.
water for obvious reasons, right? So bottle service is one of the things.
She's making a drug reference.
No, I am. No. Well, I do think that's another thing that has killed it. To some extent, the drugs in use, and it's not everyone is in the club is on drugs, but whatever, at any one time, inform the type of experience.
Can I tell you, just before you talk about your cocaine experience, I just imagining the Lloyd Webber WhatsApp right now.
Okay,
Isabella, wow.
No.
What have you uncovered?
What I'm saying is that there's actually a really great book about the music industry, which I don't know if anyone's ever read it, which is called Black Vinyl, White Powder.
Yes.
And it's by a guy called Simon Napier Bell. And his sort of thesis is that the music evolved in response to what kind of drugs were the kind of big prevalent ones at the time, which in some ways it's really obvious. And, when psychedelic drugs come in, the music obviously changes in a relatively obvious way. But there are other ways that are sort of less obvious. But it's an interesting thesis, and it's actually a great book about the music.
Punk comes in with speed.
Yes, and all that sort of stuff, right? If you look at what's happened in football with cocaine use, if you look at what's happened in it's like all the bad things have come from the fact that like coke is everywhere now, and it's cheap and it's horrible. It's a different type of experience, whereas ecstasy was this kind of great communal thing, and that has changed a lot in clubs. Booths, that's killed nightclubs.
Booths?
Booths, yeah, like little seating areas. I mean, you don't need a seating area in a nightclub.
Do you know what? I'm not a nightclub guy, but I would go if there was a booth.
I know, well, don't worry, there's one everywhere and then they're all closing, right? So you've got they've had a broken economic model. They have appealed to the biggest dickheads in the world, right? There's now these whole rituals with drinks when someone orders champagne in a club. It's very performative. They've got a whole sort of thing, and sometimes there are flares going up. It's all ridiculous, right? So they've optimized for the ultra high end person.
And this is happening at Equinox in Kingston.
I'll tell you what else is people are on their smartphones all the time. So people are taken out of the communal experience. So all of these things, I'm not saying that and there's little bits of all these things. And
so it's cocaine plus COVID plus smartphones.
Booze, bottle service is a big one.
That's the 21st century right there.
Yeah. Well, look at what happened to Ibiza, okay? Ibiza was a really cool hippie island that had lots of sort of fun things, these big super clubs, but it's now full of the worst people in the world and the biggest chiselers in the world. It's like the perfect marriage where they want to sort of rip everybody off, and people want to be ripped off because they're just taking pictures of themselves, and it's all performative and it's all grim and there's no soul, okay? So also all of these broken economic models, so what happened is that they priced local people out because you were optimizing always for kind of...
Like football.
Football. It's very, very similar. It's the same sort of things and you see so much of the sort of... I don't know, when you're thinking back to that Wembley final of the Euros, and all the trouble was outside. That's people who can't get in, can't have tickets, and there's lots of drugs awash in that. Lots of things it's the economic model broke, and they broke it themselves. Having said that, there are now lots of pubs with DJs.
I am loving this so much.
This is a big thing now that people are doing, which is that there are pubs, and they start off as pubs in the evening, but they've got until a 3 a.m. license, and they kind of become something different as the night goes on. And there are quite a few of these. I don't think that nightlife will truly die, because it can't, because people want to be out there.
If I walk into a pub and it says there's a DJ, I do that, the Grandpa Simpson meme.
Yeah.
Right? I just go, no, do you know what? I'm walking straight out.
But often these pubs, it doesn't start. If you go in at 6:30, there isn't one. But by the time it gets to midnight, there is one. And there are places that are sort of adapting like that.
Yeah.
I really hope, if again there's a sort of change in the type of drugs that people are using and the type. No, but it's true. You have to say it because it's a big part of the scene. Do you not think it is? I do.
Well, you know what? Clearly.
Come on.
Yeah, listen, I'm not a nightclub guy. Never have been, never will be. But listen, I respect their right to exist. My main experience of nightclubs is my favourite Channel 4 show, Night Coppers, set in Brighton, which is always fights in nightclubs and fights outside nightclubs. I guess they got Hughes, then got commodified. But yeah, those 80s nightclubs, there's still the odd one or two in every town, right? I'd love to know our listeners' 80s, 90s nightclub names.
Oh, please send us your provincial. Can't be London. Not interested in London or capital cities. No, nor Manchester, no Glasgow. It must be like provincial, like Tuxedo Junctions in Eastbourne.
Yeah, what was Kettering's main nightclub in the 90s? I'd like to know. There you go, Isabella. Got more than you bargained for there, didn't you? I didn't. Sometimes they ask Marina questions, and I think I don't know if she'll have an answer to this, but boy, does she have an answer for that. Goodness me.
I've got more on that, but anyway, we move on.
I absolutely dread to hear what the adverts are going to be for now. This episode is brought to you by Sky, where you can watch unmissable shows, including the thrilling new Sky original series, The Day of the Jackal, starring Academy Award winner Eddie Redmayne and BAFTA Award winner Lashana Lynch.
She is terrific. It's based on Frederick Forsyth's acclaimed novel, The Day of the Jackal. The series is a contemporary reimagining of the classic thriller that sees an unrivaled lone assassin, the Jackal.
It's his day.
Take on one last job, putting his secret life in extreme jeopardy. He's under relentless global pursuit from secret agent Bianca. The hunter has become the hunted.
Oh, man, I hate it when that happens. It's one of my absolute favourite books, The Day of the Jackal. It is brilliant, and I can't wait to see these two do it as well. The book itself, and you can see from the trailer as well, is taut, it's propulsive, it's got everything you'd want in a great thriller.
That's right. Lashana Lynch, who, by the way, is superb in every single thing she does, plays a British intelligence officer, again, who won't stop until she has taken the Jackal down.
Eddie Redmayne plays the elusive assassin, the Jackal. Can't be that elusive if I know that Eddie Redmayne is playing him. I could work out where Eddie Redmayne is if I had to.
It's less of a good movie, though, is it? Just you sitting there with your phone trying to work out where Eddie Redmayne is.
Yeah.
It's done.
He's in Soho. But it's a real belter, and these two, I think, are going to do it justice.
Espionage, subterfuge, violence, they will stop at nothing to achieve their goals. Watch the new Sky original series, The Day of the Jackal, on Sky now. Oh, look, there's a really good question about Blankety Blank and prizes from David Audis, who says he saw Rob Beckett on Blankety Blank.
You know that Rob Beckett is literally next door right now. He's doing Parenting Hell with... is it a question about Rob Beckett?
Yes.
Should we get him?
In the next door studio.
Should we see
right.
next week?
If they haven't started,
oh, God,
grab
they'll be in the
him.
middle of something. Oh, they haven't even started now? Maybe we'll get him. David, if we get Rob in... Here he comes.
Here
Bobby
comes the
Beckett.
horse's mouth.
Here comes the horse's mouth himself. How dare you? Hello, Rob. David Audis has asked a question. He said, I saw Rob Beckett on Blankety Blank. He's very good on that, isn't he, David? He missed the main prize for the contestant. You shocked me. But
I'm quite good at Blankety Blank, but that was a tough one.
So he bought the contestant a 75-inch TV out of his own pocket. Is that true?
Yes, correct.
Oh, that's a nice thing to do.
That's lovely, Rob.
And he's asking, do celebs often similarly cover those things? It's hard when you're on a show like that and you lose someone money.
Yeah, well, normally, like, when you do it, it's not down to you exactly. It's like you're involved in a big thing, and you've got, like, normally a charity one is you go on it, you raise money for charity.
For you.
It's actual punters. But this one, I got to the final one, and this guy was like 75, 80, and they loved him. He had like a pink suit on. He was dancing, and he was going like, and the prizes he won were terrible. It was like podcast equipment. He didn't even know what that was. And then I think he won like sort of like the contents of a fridge or something mental like that. And then he went to Bradley. All I wanted though, I can't. My eyes are going. I can't see the telly.
Oh, Rob,
and I love watching
on,
football, and I can't see them play, and I don't know who's who. So if I did win this money, I'd buy a telly.
Oh.
And then we lost, and the mood in the room was horrific.
Yeah.
And I just said to him, I went, I'll get you a telly. I just panicked.
Yeah.
And obviously you get paid to go on that show, so I thought I'll just earn a bit less that day or whatever. So I got him a telly, but he's cheeky though, because he said 75. Then when I went through it, it was 85 he wanted. I mean, his eyes are gone. But yeah, he was a lovely old man. It was a good episode there. But I don't normally happen, but that was particularly heartstrings are pulled.
Rob, thank you so much. I know you're in the next room doing your podcast
fine, no worries, love
with
the
Josh.
show. Keep it up. See you soon.
Thanks, Rob.
Bye.
Thank you so much to Rob Beckett for that. Again, Isabella Lloyd-Webber got more than she expected, and David Ordis gets more than he expected as well. And it's interesting. We had the same thing. We did the only time I really remember it was doing Pointless Celebrities, Children in Need, and Mark Foster was in the final round, and he got down to 1 point, and it was like $5,000 for Children in Need, and it genuinely, as Rob just said, the mood in the studio was so awful. So I said, I sort of looked over at Xander. I didn't really get his okay. I said, we'll cover that. We'll give you the $5,000 because you were so unlucky to get that. And after I said to Xander, was that okay? He went, if you hadn't said it, I would have done.
Heartstrings were pulled, as
Yeah.
Rob said.
Yeah, exactly. I love that the guy asked for a bigger TV.
Yeah, we just got one through.
Yeah.
Last week, we had what began as an anodyne discussion about how you might order domestic bookshelves.
Well, do you know what? It didn't even start as that. It started as a question about just bookshelves in the back of shots.
Yeah, and coffee table books.
Yeah.
I'm afraid it quickly spiraled into something much less pleasant, and it's been raging on social media and via email, in fact.
So my system is, by and large, I'll put big books all together, smaller books all together, which you thought was
A war crime.
psychopathy of the highest order. People
We have a
seem to have
system at
supported
home,
me.
which I
Yeah.
believe that it's
So
a form
your
of
system.
gaslighting. However, unfortunately, I'm required to read a legal statement for my husband. He would like to say, our books are arranged by genre. Film, TV and music are separate, but next to each other. Also in non-fiction, a sport, biography, history, politics, digital, philosophy, science, journalism, reference and travel. There's also a growing section of whimsical memoirs that needs a brutal pruning. What? In fiction, we divide novels after 1945 from before, which means there are roughly the same number of each. These are arranged alphabetically by order. Then there are plays and lastly poetry. We go with my system and not Marina's because I bothered to have one. If we went with Marina's system, all our books would be piled on either her desk or beside the bed in the order of whichever one she last took off the shelf and didn't put back. There is confusingly a separate shelf of Hollywood books that for some reason had to be moved into a different room for the rest of film. But you know, happy wife, happy life.
Wow. Can I ask a question about your husband? Well, I have a number of questions about him, but the first one would be, does he run a Waterstones? Because it sounds like it.
I'd like to say, Kieran, I'm very grateful for so many of the things you do for me, and you'll be hearing this on your commute. Thanks for doing the tax return, all the stuff you did when I was in America for the podcast. But it will be a cold day in hell before I accept about half of that, okay? It is a gaslighting system, Kieran, and unlike a lot of people who use that term, you and I have both seen the film, okay? We know what is happening to the wife in that. We know what is happening, okay? And if you don't agree with any of this stuff, then you should start a podcast and argue back.
Yeah, I like Kieran very much. He is.
We all do, Richard. We all do.
He is. Well, I would hope you do. He is very, very, very wide of the mark here. I mean, that is a lot of people. Listen, a lot of people have got involved.
Can I just say that this is controversial. I do agree with Kieran's system. I don't agree that is what's happening with that system in our house currently.
You agree with that system?
Yeah.
You agree with splitting literature into pre-war and post-war, for example?
Yes,
and that would be the system. Because you're thinking, what should I read?
So do quite a number of notable university courses. But okay, yeah, no, sure. No, I do agree with things like that.
So
I do agree with forms of categorization.
So you would be aware at all times that something would be pre-war or post-war? Your life very much is, there's a schism in the
Do I look like
middle
someone
of
who
it.
doesn't know whether someone came before or after the war? Come on.
That is quite something. I mean, but also that's quite a long time ago. So the post-war must be growing and growing and growing. And that's my worry about it. That why don't you go?
Well, I read a lot of very old stuff, and I'm not talking about stuff in the 1980s, Richard.
I mean, why don't you? For example, do you know what?
Why don't you? I would
No,
love it.
But the war seems like an unusual thing, and also presumably you've been.
The war seems like an unusual national event, via which I mean, it did change quite a lot of stuff.
How long have you been using that system for? Would be one question.
God, I mean, a lot. Decades.
Okay, so I think at some point you have to the between 1939 and 1945 you have to move that forward. I think you have to say
the fulcrum event from so pre 9/11 and pre the financial crisis.
Well, let's say
nonsense.
if you've done it for 2 decades, we'll move it forward and say that you have pre the first Slade album and post the first Slade album, just so you have equal numbers for each.
Okay, I'll pass it on to Captain Gaslight and we'll see what he says.
So anyway, people at home, they think I'm not a psychopath, and lots of people are saying, of course you have to put books in order of height because sometimes you have
Some
unusual
of
shaped
them.
shelves. Most of them.
What?
Most of them are saying I'm not a psychopath. Richard is not a psycho. Literally the first thing here, Matthew Lee. My heart goes out to Marina's husband. And he ends there. No, my heart goes out to Marina's husband, but it is foreign to me the notion you would organise books so they can be easily retrieved. That is almost as pathological as organising books by colour.
Why would you not organise books so that they could be easily retrieved?
Well, how
A
big
rare
is your house?
silence.
No,
and I don't want that
oh,
edited out in not even a second of it, because that was about 9 seconds. Okay, why wouldn't you?
Right. How big is your house?
What's that supposed to mean? How
Well,
many shelves? How many yards of shelves have I
if
got?
you
I haven't
live
got
in
Umberto Eco's library. Let's put it that way.
If you live in a library, if you lived in an actual library, for sure, then you have an issue of, and we need to make sure that these books are easily recoverable. Almost every single person in this world, possibly not the Lloyd Webbers, but everybody else, right, has houses where it's not like we got 40 rooms. You think, oh my God, how am I going to find that book? Our books are they are where they are. It's not like we're going, I can't find it anywhere. Well, it's in one of the kind of 5 bookshelves you might have in various different rooms. You don't need some you're not the Smithsonian. Where you kind of
Let's
go.
let some listeners do some more talking.
Yes.
Right? Max McGinnity says, I'm now a proud member of the Hyde Hive. Marina's
God.
bookshelving system is the only correct one, and the rest of you are indeed psychopaths.
Yeah, so the only correct one is to have alphabetically pre-war and post-war in terms of your fiction, and then some other wishy-washy
Stop
system I
talking
couldn't
about
work
the war.
out.
Really? Stop talking about
Stop
the
talking
war.
about the war. You know
Right.
it's quite important.
John B.
Wow.
Yeah, I do.
Wow.
John
That's what you
B's-
know. What you and Trump both. You want us to forget, don't you?
John B says, I must admit that until today's podcast, Marina was very much my fantasy woman, prepare for disappointment. However, her book filing system has shattered that illusion, and I no longer wish to throw my hat into the ring should she decide to leave her husband. See, it is a form of gaslighting. The old wife trap.
See, I think that most people do not have enough books to have a system that needs any sort of categorization other than, by and large, you just want books to look nice on a shelf and look nice next to each other. And I just don't think most people need to retrieve their books in the way you're saying.
I need
even
to
if they
retrieve
did,
my books, though.
we had a discussion on Twitter with a guy called who runs Bother's Bar, Brig Bother, who works at the University Library in Cambridge, which is the biggest library in Britain, and they organise things by size as well, because it is the most efficient way to organise
as I said
things.
to Richard, when people need to find a book in that library,
Yeah.
they type something into a computer and they get the number of the stack and they have to go and find it. Okay, I'm
Yeah, it
not
would- you know what,
suggesting
it
that
wouldn't- it
anyone
wouldn't-
has a domestic stack. Okay, which is with a computer which tells you what shelf number you might find the book. And if you do,
admit you would
then
like that.
we're all going to the Hague,
Admit
right?
you would like that.
Well, miss, I would like that. No, I
Yeah.
wouldn't. I'm not sitting down at a computer. I like the system. I can't believe it. Am I coming around to Kieran's system? I'm just saying that the system doesn't work quite as well as he thinks it does.
Listen, there are worse methods. Okay, here's a few. Sheila Russell. Sheila, God bless you, and thanks for listening, but come on. Sheila said, I used to sort all fiction alphabetically, but separating male and female authors.
This was a big thing. Lots of people said this.
I was much criticised for this, so I went to mixing them, but it hurt me to put Virginia Woolf next to P.G. Wodehouse. But I did it in the spirit of non-discrimination. However, I still have all my detective novels still separated by gender, so Richard is not next to Sarah Paretsky. Wow. That's quite something, isn't it? Gender divided.
Gender divided was a really big thing, and lots of people wrote in and said that they divided according to gender, which I thought was crazy. But I really like Rachel Marshall's one. This is her pre-marriage arrangement, by the way. They were organised by vibes, or rather the mood of mind I'd want to be in to read them. And okay, here are her categories: challenging books, sad books, fun books, cozy books, favourite books, etc. Okay, which I have to say
quite like
I love.
that.
I've got a lot
I quite like it.
lot of time for it. This does not happen any longer because my husband used to be a bookseller and it was going to give him an aneurysm.
Oh, no. I don't mind that.
I don't mind that,
vibes
actually.
based. Size based and vibes based. A lot of people have sent pictures of colour based, which I sort of get. I can kind of see it looks nice. And if you have a certain type of personality, that's helpful. I think yours is the worst of all worlds, is that it's not simple, and at the same time doesn't optimize space. It doesn't have any. I don't see that it has anything to
This system
commend
was
it.
without merit. Well, take it up with the librarian. Now, and there was one Andrea McCulloch wrote, and she said, I only have 2% of my former library as I'm now in a care home, but my oldest books, some from childhood, are all close together. And she sent me a
Andrea.
picture of her shelves, and they're really, it's like My Family and Other Animals, Nella Lasts War. Wow, that's such an amazing book.
Yeah.
If you've never read that, that's absolutely brilliant. There are so many. Is that Black Beauty? I'm trying to look. There's so many nice ones here. Okay, so I can get that she's got like, the childhood ones all together as a sort of.
And listen, and Andrea makes the best point of all there, I think, which is any of us who do even have to worry about how we organise our books are lucky to have all those books in our life, I think. And Andrea has 2% of hers left, and she, you narrow it down to the ones that really mean something to you. But books are such a joy and such a beauty. If you want to do them by colour, you want to do them by size, you want to do them with Kieran and Marina's ridiculous system. I think it's beautiful to live with books in your life.
I just love that this has sparked beyond about 10 times more debate than literally anything else we've done, some of which have been quite controversial. People feel incredibly intense emotions about this, which I have really enjoyed.
So in some ways I'd like to shut the door on it now, because I think it's impossible to go past what Andrea says that. But if you have an even weirder system that you just think we'd like to hear about, then do tell us. Or if you live with somebody, perhaps more importantly, who has an even weirder system, then do tell us.
Richard, Alexa Wheeler would love to talk about coming up with names. I know you're a big fan of 70s snooker players for coming up names for characters in your book.
Yeah.
She says, I'm currently reading We Solve Murders and have a question about how you name characters, particularly in stories that take place more or less in our world, so not including fantasy names. What's the thought process when you choose names and make sure no one important already has them?
Oh, gosh, there's two good questions. I love coming up with names, and often when I get the name of a character, I get the character. And so, Rosie D'Antonio, who's the novelist in this book, when I got the name, I sort of knew where I was. So usually they just pop into my head. As you say, quite often I'll take 70s or 80s snooker players. I've used a lot of their surnames. But funnily enough, for We Solve Murders, there's a character in that called Justin Scroggy, who is a sheriff, and he is named quite often. You'll auction off the rights to have your name in a book. And, people pay good money to have your name in a book.
For charity.
For charity, yeah yes, exactly. It's just, it's just another nice way of making money.
Another revenue stream for you, Richard.
Exactly. I did a crime festival, would have been 2 years ago, I guess, in Oxford, and there were loads of crime writers there, and we had an evening, and I was doing a speech, and I thought I'm going to auction off naming a character in my book, because it was for access to education. I thought this is a really lovely thing to do. I said, well, look, got a character in my book. I will name that character after somebody in this room. And bidding went up, and it was, lovely. And it went up to about $3,000 or something. It was a really nice kind of, someone bid. And the person who won was a guy called Justin Scroggy. Which I thought, great. That is a name that I can use. Sometimes people win, and you're like, Alan Smith. I don't know, maybe. So Justin Scroggy wins this. I'm happy, and the charity is happy because they made money. So we're just about to finish that off when Chris Brookmeyer, the brilliant Scottish crime writer who I love, just said, you know what, I quite like that name. I was like, oh. And he said, no, I just finished the book, and I do actually need a name I need. So he said, why don't we bid against each other to win the name? So Justin Scroggy in the end doesn't have to pay anything, because me and Chris Brookmeyer then start bidding against each other to win this name to put in our book, and I outbidded Chris Brookmeyer. So Justin Scroggy is in my name, which he should have paid for, but I ended up paying for. And so Justin Scroggy is the name.
Can
of
I ask, did you know
that
he was going to be the sheriff, or did you think, I'm going to use Justin Scroggy somewhere in this book?
I had not really started writing at that point.
Okay.
I'd sketched things out. I knew who the main characters were, but yes, I didn't know my plot. But very, very early on, I had this sheriff in South Carolina.
It's perfect.
And I thought, come on, Justin Scroggy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you'd be called, wouldn't it? But yeah, it's like certain people's bookshelves. It's very vibes based when you come up with names. But I love it, and when you've got a good one, it's very very redolent. But yeah, quite often I will auction off names in books. So keep an eye out for it. But next time, someone's going to pay me. I have a question for you, Marina, from Laura Russell, who says, when newspapers or news articles appear in TV or film, does someone have to write all the headlines and or articles that are visible, or do they use real newspapers?
Very good question, yes. They do write the headlines, and journalists who, love talking about their industry, have a complete conniption any single time they see a headline on screen, because it's all wrong. It doesn't sound like a headline.
Yeah.
It's got that thing that Rupert Murdoch absolutely hates, which is white space in it. Like if there's, I'm not paying you to put white space in my newspaper. They're sort of badly laid out.
Yeah.
This sort of thing enrages journalists more than the fact that they're being, portrayed as kind of venal, alcoholic, essentially petty criminals
because
themselves.
That's true.
Yeah. But the headlines and the layouts are not accurate as they would appear. So people really care about that.
But the headline will always be so on those. It'd be Bradford man in jail for attack on local pensioner.
Yeah,
I think
and
that's
it just wouldn't be that. So in general, they get very angry about that journalist when they see it. God, there was a program was it called Press, and it had Ben Chaplin and Priyanka Burford in it, and she was a Broad Street editor and he was a tabloid editor.
oh, how are they ever going to get along?
Yeah, okay, but the entire show on Twitter at that time was just journalists saying it would never look like that. The headline doesn't look like that. The layout's all wrong. Why is there all like, oh my God, look at the story. So they get very annoyed about it. Yes, so someone has to write that, but it tends not to be journalists, and they get very annoyed about it. The other thing is occasionally, like in that Beckham documentary, because I think they wanted to include the stories about the affair, but unfortunately all the affair headlines were clearly not approved by executive producer of the Beckham documentary, David Beckham. So they created, I think, some, I'm sure they'd call them composites, so that they were able to quickly flash up things, but it wasn't the actual headlines that had appeared. That's in a documentary setting, so that's slightly different.
But sometimes they don't even use the same font, which I don't understand. Is they presumably they can do, they're allowed to, and presumably, because by and large, people who make props for television shows are unbelievable.
Meticulous.
They're just brilliant. And I've never understood even some of the highest class dramas when you'll see a front page or something that it just doesn't look like a front page, and it obviously doesn't look like a front page. So what
And
gives?
it's not that hard to do, which a lot of journalists will be devastated. It's not actually some arcane sorcery. It is quite easy to do. So it's one of those things that takes people out of, particularly journalists, out of the action. But yes, in general. Sometimes, however, I have to say, what would be a witty headline or a punning headline. I mean, not necessarily about a dead body, but you have to have.
It's
we have to
murder
just be
out
able
there.
to see, murder on the dance floor. You have to. Well, mind you, you have to see that it did actually. So you have to see the thing that occurred, and it has to be done in quite an on-the-nose way so you can see it. But yes, the right fonts would be great, and not loads of white space off to one side, which just sort of stops halfway along the line. If a headline's 2 lines, it needs to be justified as justified margins.
Have you ever seen that front page? I think it's the Manchester Evening News, where the headline is 2 bodies found in Cheadle Hulme, and then there's an advert that says killers to play at Manchester Arena. And you're like, okay.
I haven't seen that one.
You know what? There's a similar thing, but I forgive it, in Only Murders in the Building, because I love Only Murders in the Building.
So do I.
But their podcast is all over the place. I mean, what is it that they're putting out that people are listening to there?
Agreed, but can I just say that every single show now, the B plot is like, oh, I don't know, they've got a podcast.
Yes, it's always
so
crime-solving podcasts. Always.
Yeah, or just some other type of podcast. There is no other. For instance, in that Nobody Wants This, it was it seemed everybody wanted it because it rated very highly. The B plot is they've got a podcast.
Yeah,
it's now the B plot in a whole load of shows.
but it's useful. I mean, if you're a detective writer, then it is useful because people are investigating, and if you write police procedural, fine. But then there's that genre which is amateur detectives, which again, but why are they detecting? Podcast is sort of perfect in a way because yes, they're amateurs, but yes, we understand why they're detecting, and we understand that their job is to investigate, and people understand it. But there are so many of them now.
Yeah.
There's too many podcasts.
Many too many. On that note, perhaps we better draw this one to a conclusion.
Yeah,
not
let's do
not
that.
permanently.
Not permanently, yeah.
Episode finale, not season finale, or
yeah.
even series.
Yes, let's do that, shall we? Looking forward to seeing all sorts of people at the Albert Hall on the 4th of December. That's going to be fun. And we've said before, if it goes well, we will go around the country. And if it doesn't go well, we will not go around the country. So apologies for that.
And the other thing I will say is that we have just recorded some new episodes for the membership club, and they are on. I've spent almost a lifetime preparing for 2 on the event known as It's a Royal Knockout.
Yeah, they were, and it's the podcast episodes themselves are both royal knockouts. I'll say that they are well worth listening to. If you like to join the membership club, which you do not have to do in any way whatsoever, because while if you listen to them, you'll enjoy them, you will also very happily sail through the rest of your life without listening to them. I promise you that. But I just sat back and listened to Marina. It's an absolute treat. So you can, all the details at therestisentertainment.com, where also you can put your questions for future episodes of the Q&A.
The address is restisentertainment@gmail.com.
I just said restisentertainment.com. I'm so slapdash.
Well, that I believe is for the membership tier.
Oh, is it?
Yes. So both addresses are relevant.
Both addresses are in it. Okay.
And on that postal term, we will...
Yeah. Oh, by the way, so therestisentertainment.com is for anything to do with the Rest is Entertainment, which is pre-war, and therestisentertainment@gmail.com, that's for anything post-war.
Let it go. See you next Tuesday.
See you next Tuesday.